Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The pen felt heavier than it should have in Clara's trembling hand. 43 years of life, 18 years of marriage, reduced to a signature on divorce papers that smelled faintly of her lawyer's expensive cologne and broken dreams. The courthouse clock tower chimed 3 times as she walked down the marble steps into the harsh October sunlight, her heels echoing with finality, against stone worn smooth by countless others who had walked the same path of dissolution. Clara Martinez, soon to be Clara Santos again. Reclaiming the name she'd surrendered, a 25 stood on the courthouse steps and felt the weight of absolute freedom crash over her like a tide. The settlement had been generous. Richard's guilt over his affairs had made him amenable to giving her the downtown brownstone, half their savings, and her great-aunt's specular bequest that had sat untouched in storage for 3 years. But money, she realized as she watched the autumn leaves dance in spirals around her feet, could not fill the hollow space where her certainty about life used to live. That evening, sitting in Mickey's bar, a dive establishment that smelled of stale beer, and honest working people, Clara made 2 decisions that would change everything. The first was to order a double whiskey neat, something the suburban housewife version of herself would never have done. The second was to accept the offer from the mysterious woman with auburn hair and predatory green eyes who slid into the bar stool beside her. "You look like someone who just signed papers," the woman said, her voice carrying the kind off-smoky quality that suggested secrets and cigarettes. She was striking in an unconventionally sharp cheekbones, full lips, and an aura of danger that drew stares from every man in Thebur. "That obvious?" Clara asked, surprised by her own willingness to engage with a stranger. "I'm Anna Cross. I make it my business to read people." Anna signaled the bartender for 2 more drinks. "Divorce papers, specifically. And judging by your clothes and the way you're holding yourself, you got a decent settlement but feel like you traded your soul for security." Clara laughed bitterly. "You're either psychic or you've been through it yourself." "Neither. I'm a bounty hunter." Anna's smile was sharp as broken glass. "And I have approposition for someone with your particular combination of resources and motivation." 3 drinks later, Clara found herself staring at a photograph of the most beautiful woman she had ever seen. Dark hair fell in waves past delicate shoulders. Brown eyes held mysteries Clara couldn't begin to fathom. And there was something in the woman's expression, part vulnerability, part defiance, that made Clara's heart skip in a way it hadn't for years. "Daphne Allen," Anna explained. "Art thief. Very high-end, very selective. She's been eluding law enforcement for 5 years, but she's gotten sloppy. Word is she's planning something big in city, and there's a substantial bounty on her head." "What does this have to do with me?" Anna's green eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. "You have a moaning time and nothing to lose. I have connections, experience, and a need for someone who can blend into the art world social circles. 50-50 split of the bounty plus expenses." Clara stared at the photograph again, feeling something stir in her chest that she couldn't quite name. "I don't know anything about bounty hunting." "You'd learn fast." Anna leaned closer, and Clara caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with danger. "Question is, are you ready to start living again? Or are you going to go home to that empty house and spend the next 20 years wondering what if?" That night, Clara Santos bought her first gun, asterisk. 3 weeks of intensive training with Anna had transformed Clara in ways she hadn't expected. Her body, soft from years of comfortable suburban living, began to remember its strength. Her mind, dulled by the routine of marriage to a man who barely saw her, sharpened with purpose. And her heart, which had felt frozen for so long, began to thaw with the anticipation of something she couldn't yet name. The first lead came through. Anna's network of informants. Daphne Allen had been seen at several gallery openings in the arts district, always alone, always watching. She favored high-end establishments that dealt in European works from the 1940s. Pieces with questionable provenance that attracted collectors more interested in possession than legitimacy. "She's not just stealing randomly," Anna explained us. They sat in Clara's newly reclaimed brownstone, studying surveillance photos spread across the dining room table. "There's a pattern here. Look at the pieces she's targeted." Clara leaned closer, studying the images of paintings and sculptures that had disappeared from private collections over the past 2 years. Each piece was beautiful, but they shared something else. They were all works that had surfaced mysteriously after World War II, often with gaps in their ownership history. War loot, Clara breathed, understanding dawning. Exactly. She's not just a thief. She's some kind of vigilante, returning stolen art to families who lost everything during the war. Anna's expression grew thoughtful, which makes her considerably more dangerous than your average criminal. Dangerous how? Someone with a moral mission is unpredictable. They take risks ordinary criminals wouldn't. They have something to die for. Anna fixed Clara with an intense stare. And something to kill for. That Saturday night, Clara found herself standing outside the Morrison Gallery, wearing a black cocktail dress that cost more than her car payments used to be, and feeling like she was a Budo step off a cliff. The gallery was hosting an exhibition of recovered European treasures. Exactly the kind of event Daphne Allen wouldn't be able to resist. The opening was crowded with the usual mixture of art lovers, social climbers, and collectors who treated beauty as a commodity. Clara nursed a glass of champagne and tried to look like she belonged, while scanning the crowd for a face she had memorized from dozens of photographs, and then she saw her. Daphne Allen stood in front of a Monet water lily painting, her dark hair catching the gallery lights like silk. She wore a simple white dress that somehow made every other woman in the room look overdressed. And there was something about her stillness, the way she observed the painting as if it were telling her secrets, that drew Clara forward before she could think bitter of it. Beautiful, isn't it? Clara said, moving to stand beside her. Daphne turned, and Clara felt the breath leave her lungs. The photographs hadn't captured the intensity of her gaze, the way her brown eyes seemed to see straight through to Clara's soul. Beauty is subjective, Daphne replied, her voice carrying a slight accent Clara couldn't place. But truth is absolute. And this painting has quite a story to tell. What kind of story? Daphne's smile was sad and knowing. The kind that involves theft, loss, and families who never stopped hoping. She gestured toward the small placard beside the painting. The gallery claims this was recovered from a private collection, but they're very vague about how it was lost in the first place. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Are you suggesting it was stolen? I'm suggesting that sometimes what we call recovery is just theft wearing a prettier mask. Daphne's eyes met Clara's again, and there was something electric in that connection, something that made Clara's heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the thrill of the hunt. I'm Daphne, Clara. The name left her lips before she could think of a cover story. Clara. Daphne repeated it like she was tasting wine. You don't look like the usual gallery crowd. What do I look like? Daphne studied her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. Like someone who's just discovered she's been living someone else's life. The accuracy of the observation hit Clara like a physical blow. That's very perceptive of a stranger. I make it my business to understand people, especially people who are hunting me. Clara's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you mean. Daphne's smile was enigmatic. Unacross is many things, but subtle isn't one of them. Did you really think I wouldn't notice I was being followed? Before Clara could respond, Daphne was moving away, weaving through the crowd with fluid grace. Clara followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Unsure whether she was the hunter or the hunted anymore, Daphne led her through the gallery's main floor, past paintings and sculptures worth millions, past clusters of people discussing the aesthetic merits of human suffering transformed into art. Finally, she pushed through a door marked staff only and disappeared down a narrow hallway. Clara hesitated for only a moment before following. The hallway was dimly lit and smelled of old building and cleaning supplies. Clara could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears as she followed the soft sound of Daphne's heels on linoleum. At the end of the hall, light spilled from an open door the gallery's staff bathroom, small and utilitarian compared to the opulent public spaces. Daphne stood with her back to the mirror, her dark eyes fixed on Clara as she entered. That space was impossibly small, forcing them to stand close enough that Clara could smell Daphne's perfume, something light and floral that seemed at odds with everything she knew about art thieves. Close the door, Daphne said quietly. Clara's hand found the door handle, though every rational part of her mind screamed that this was a trap. The lock clicked with finality, sealing them into this small, fluorescent wood space that felt suddenly charged with electricity. Why did you follow Anna's offer? Daphne asked, leaning back against the sink counter. You could have taken your divorce settlement, bought a condo in Florida, spent your days playing tennis with other divorcees. Why this? I don't know. The honesty surprised Clara. Maybe because for 18 years I did what was expected of me, and where did it get me? Maybe because when Anna showed me your photograph, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. What did you feel? Claire's throat felt dry. Curiosity, attraction. She paused, gathering courage. Desire. Daphne's eyes darkened. Attraction to the danger? Or to me? Both. Neither. I don't know. Clara took a step closer, drawn by something stronger than logic. All I know is that standing here with you feels more real than anything I've experienced in years, even though you know what I am, especially because of what you are. Clara found herself close enough to touch, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Daphne's brown eyes. You're not just a thief, are you? You're trying to right wrongs that should have been addressed decades ago. Daphne's expression softened. You understand. I'm beginning to. They stood in silence for a moment, the fluorescent light humming above. Then, the distant sound of the gallery opening filtering through the door. Clara could feel something building between them, something that had nothing to do with bounty hunting or art theft and everything to do with two women recognizing something essential in each other. Clara, Daphne said softly, if you knew the whole truth about me, about what I've done and would you still be standing here? Try me. Daphne reached up, her fingers barely brushing Clara's cheek. I steal from people who built their collections on the suffering of others. I return pieces to families who thought they would never see their heritage again. And I fall in love with women who are sent to capture me. Clara's breath caught. Fall in love. Impossibly, inexplicably in love. Daphne's voice was barely a whisper. With a woman who sent her divorce papers 3 weeks ago and decided to become a bounty hunter, rather than face the emptiness of her life. How could you possibly know? Because I've been watching you too. Because from the moment Anna Cross approached you in that bar, you've been under surveillance. Because I needed to understand who was hunting me. Daphne's thumb traced Clara's jawline. What I didn't expect was to discover that the hunter had the most beautiful sad eyes I'd ever seen. Clara felt tears she hadn't realized were forming spell. Over. Daphne ... double quotes. I know this is insane. I know we've just met, that you're supposed to turn me in, that everything about this situation is impossible. But standing here with you, I feel something I've never felt before. What's that? Like I want to stop running. Before Clara could respond, before she could think or reason or remember all the ways this was wrong, Daphne's lips were on hers. Kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. But when Clara didn't pull away, when she instead stepped closer, her hands finding Daphne's waist, it deepened into something desperate and hungry. It was the kiss of two people who had been alone for too long, who had found something unexpected and necessary in the most impossible circumstances. When they finally broke apart, both women were breathing hard. Everything just changed, Clara whispered. Yes, Daphne agreed, her forehead resting against Clara's. Everything. A knock at the bathroom door broke the spell. Excuse me? Is everything all right in there? A gallery staff member's voice carried concern and professional courtesy. Clara and Daphne stepped apart, and Clara could see her own confusion and desire reflected in the other woman's eyes. We need to go, Daphne said quietly. Together. There are things you need to see, things you need to understand before you decide whether to turn me in or trust me. Clara's mind reeled. Everything she had thought she knew about this assignment, about herself, about what she wanted from life, had shifted in the space of that kiss. My car is in the back lot, she heard herself say. Daphne smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Then let's go rewrite our story. Clara's hands shook slightly as she unlocked the storage unit on the outskirts of the city. It was nearly midnight, and the facility was deserted except for the security lights, casting long shadows between the rows of metal doors. Daphne stood. Beside her, patient and watchful, her presence both comforting and electrifying. I inherited this from my great Aunt Elena 3 years ago, Clara explained as the door rolled up with a metallic screech. My ex-husband thought it was just junk, so we never bothered to go through it properly. The storage unit was larger than it appeared from outside, packed with furniture covered in dust sheets, boxes labeled in spidery handwriting, and along the back wall, several large, flat packages that were clearly paintings. Daphne moved forward, like she was in a trance, her fingers trailing over the wrapped canvases. Clara, do you know anything about your great-aunt's life before she came to America? Not much. She emigrated after the war, never married, worked as a seamstress. She was always secretive about her past. Clara watched as Daphne carefully unwrapped. One of the packages, revealing a small but exquisite landscape. Why? Because this, Daphne held up the painting, her voice thick with emotion, belonged to the Goldstein family. They owned a small gallery in Vienna before the Nazis came. She turned to face Clara, tears glistening in her eyes. I've been looking for this piece for 2 years. The last serving member of the family hired me to find it. Clara felt the world tilt. That's impossible. Annalena wasn't. She couldn't have been. She wasn't a Nazi, Daphne said gently. But she might have been someone who acquired pieces through the chaos of the war, maybe not knowing their true origin. It happened more than people want to admit. They spent the next hour unwrapping painting after painting, sculpture after sculpture. Each piece told a story of loss, of families torn apart, of cultural heritage scattered to the winds of war and never properly returned. My God, Clara whispered, staring at a small Degas sketch that made her heart ache with its beauty. She had all of this, and she never said anything. Maybe she was protecting you. Maybe she was protecting herself. Daphne sat on an old trunk, looking suddenly exhausted. Or maybe she was carrying guilt she didn't know how to resolve. Clara sat beside her, their shoulders touching in the dusty silence of the storage unit. Is this way you do what you do, return these pieces? My grandmother was a curator at a museum in Prague before the war. She managed to hide some pieces, save others, but she lost everything else. Her career, her country, most of her family. Daphne's voice was soft but steady. She spent her entire life telling me stories of both art she'd lost, the pieces she'd seen disappear into private collections of people who cared more about possession than preservation. So you became her avenging angel? I became someone who couldn't sleep at night knowing that beauty stolen from murdered families was hanging in the homes of people who called it investment. Clara reached for Daphne's hand, intertwining their fingers. What happens now? Now we decide whether you're going to climb across and claim your bounty, or whether you're going to help me return your great-aunt's collection to the families it belongs to. The question hung between them like a bridge. Clara wasn't sure. She was brave enough to talk us. There's something else, Clara said quietly. Something I need to tell you about Anna. Daphne's expression sharpened. What? When she first approached me, I thought it was coincidence. But thinking about it now, Thedaming, the way she knew so much about my situation, double quotes Clara, met Daphne's eyes. I don't think she randomly chose me as a partner. What are you saying? I think she knew about the inheritance. I think she knew about Aunt Elena's collection. Claire felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. I think she's been using me to get to you and through you to find art she can sell on the black market. Daphne stood abruptly, beginning to pace in the small space between boxes. That would make sense. Anna Cross has a reputation in certain circles. She's not just a bounty hunter. She's a middleman for collectors who don't ask questions about provenance. So, we're both being played. Looks that way. Daphne turned to face Clara, her expression fierce and beautiful. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Clara stood too, feeling something crystallize in her chest, a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since signing those divorce papers. We're going to beat her at her own game. That's dangerous. Anna Cross doesn't like to lose. Good thing I'm not the same person I was 3 weeks ago. Clara stepped closer to Daphne, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes again. Good thing I found someone worth taking risks for. This time, when Daphne kissed her, Clara was ready for the electricity, for the way the rest of the world seemed to disappear. But she wasn't ready for the way it felt like coming home. Asterisk. The next morning brought complications in the form of a black sedan, parked across the street from Claire's brownstone. Anna Cross sat behind the wheel, her auburn hair catching the early sunlight, her predatory smile visible even from a distance. She knows, Daphne said from her position at the upstairs window. She had spent the night, and Clara was still adjusting to the surreal pleasure of waking up beside someone who understood the weight of secrets. How long do you think she's been watching? Long enough. Daphne moved away from the window, her expression grim. We need to assume she knows about the storage unit, about the collection, about us. Clara felt fear and excitement were in her chest. So what's our move? We give her what she wants. Or what she thinks she wants. 3 hours later, Clara walked out of her front door, carrying a carefully wrapped package. She could feel Anna's eyes on her as she walked to her car, could sense the other woman's satisfaction as she followed Clara through the city streets to a meeting that had been arranged via text message. The warehouse in the industrial district was exactly the kind of place where shady deals were made and forgotten. Anna was already waiting when Clara arrived, flanked by two men who looked like they'd stepped out of a film. Noir all shoulders in menace and expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the bulge of concealed weapons. Clara, Anna's smile was sharp. As ever, I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve. Just being careful, Clara held up the wrapped package. One Picasso sketch, as requested, and Daphne Allen. Will be here shortly. She thinks she's meeting me alone to make some kind of deal. Claire forced herself to project confidence she didn't feel. She trusts me. Anna's laugh was like breaking glass. Trust, such a dangerous emotion. She gestured to one of her companions, who stepped forward to take the package. You know, Clara, when I first approached you, I thought you might be useful, but ultimately disposable. I'm pleased to discover I underestimated you. Just doing my job. No, you're doing much more than that. Anna moved closer, her green eyes glittering with something cold and hungry. You see, I know about your great aunt's collection. I know a booth storage unit. And I know that you and our little art thief have developed quite an attachment to each other. Claire's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself to remain steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Anna's smile widened. Just as you don't know that your ex-husband is deeply in debt to some very unpleasant people, or that those debts are about to become your problem unless you cooperate with me completely. Richard's debts are his own business. Not when he's using your name as collateral. Not when he's desperate enough to reach out to people who view violence as a business expense. Anna pulled out her phone, showing Clara a photograph that made her knees nearly buckle. Richard, bound to a chair in what looked like a basement, his face bruised, but his eyes blazing with the kind of fear Clara had never seen in them. You see, Clara, your ex-husband's gambling addiction didn't end with your divorce. If anything, it got worse. And when you can't pay what you owe to certain organizations, they get creative about collecting. Anna put the phone away. Lucky for Richard, I was able to negotiate a different payment plan. What do you want? Everything. The storage unit contents. Daphne Allen, and your continued cooperation in acquiring other pieces I'm interested in. Anna's expression hardened. In exchange, Richard lives, and you get to keep playing house with your new girlfriend. Clara felt trapped, caught between impossible choices. But before she could respond, the warehouse's main door opened and Daphne walked in. Her movements fluid and confident despite walking into what she had to know was a trap. Anna Cross, Daphne said, her voice carrying no trace of fear. I was wondering when we'd finally meet face to face. Daphne Allen, the infamous art thief with a conscience. Anna gestured for her men to spread out, effectively surrounding both women. I have to admit, I've admired your work from a distance. Flattery won't make what you're planning any less ugly. Daphne's eyes met Clara's across the space between them, and something passed between them, understanding, determination, love. What I'm planning is business. Art is valuable, guilt is profitable, and love ... Anna's laugh was harsh. Love is the greatest weakness of all. What happened next moved too. Fast for Clara to process in the moment. Daphne moved like water, flowing between Anna's men with a grace that spoke of training Clara hadn't suspected. At the same time, the warehouse's back doors burst open and figures in tactical gear poured in, shouting commands and demanding everyone get on the ground. In the chaos that followed shouts, running feet, the sharp crack of what might have been gunfire, Clara lost sight of both Anna and Daphne. When the dust settled and the federal agents had sorted through the situation, Anna Cross was in custody. Her men were being read their rights, and Daphne Allen was nowhere to be found. Agent Sarah Martinez, no relation, despite the name approached. Clara with a mixture of professional courtesy and barely concealed frustration. Miss Santos, we're going to need you to come with us for debriefing. Your cooperation in the sting operation has been noted and appreciated. Sting operation? Daphne Allen has been working with us for the past 6 months to build a case against Anna Cross and her art theft ring. Agent Martinez's expression softened slightly. She insisted on bringing you in safely, though I suspect her motives weren't entirely professional. Clara felt the world tilt again. She's been working with the FBI, art recovery specialist technically. She helps us identify and return stolen pieces to the rightful owners. Martinez guided Clara toward the exit. She also requested that we arrange for your ex-husband's safe return. Apparently, love makes people do generous things. 3 days later, Clara stood in her great aunt's brownstone, now truly her own, surrounded by FBI art recovery specialists, insurance investigators, and representatives from Familia Sacris Europe, who were finally being reunited with pieces of their heritage. The doorbell rang, and Clara's heart jumped the way it had been doing every time she heard unexpected sounds. Since the warehouse, she hadn't seen or heard from Daphne, though Agent Martinez had assured her that the other woman was safe and would be in touch soon. But it wasn't Daphne at the door. It was Richard. Her ex-husband looked older than his 45 years, his face bearing the fading marks of his ordeal, but more significantly, the weight of shame and gratitude that comes from being saved by Simeon you've wronged. Clara, he said quietly, standing awkwardly on the front steps. I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to thank you. You should be thanking Daphne, not me. I am. I did. She visited me in the hospital. Richard's smile was rueful. She's remarkable, Yabno. And she's completely in love with you. Clara felt her cheeks warm. Richard got dot. I came to apologize. For the gambling, for the debts, for putting you in danger. For 18 years of taking you for granted. He looked down at his hands. And to tell you that seeing how you've changed, how alive you look, I'm glad you found your way to happiness. Even if it took my stupidity to get you. There, before Clara could respond, another car pulled up to the curb. A familiar figure emerged, and Clara's heart did that jumping thing again. More intensely this time, Daphne Allen walked up the front path carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look younger and more approachable than Clara had ever seen her. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, and when she smiled at Clara, it was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. I hope I'm not interrupting, Daphne said, her eyes taking in the scene. Not at all, Richard said quickly. I was just leaving. He turned to Clara one more time. The happy Clara, you deserve it. After he left, Clara and Daphne stood facing each other on the front steps, suddenly awkward despite everything they'd shared. You were working with the FBI the whole time, Clara said finally. Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. Daphne shifted the champagne bottle to her other hand. You intended to, especially after the gallery bathroom. Was any of it real? What happened between us? Daphne's expression grew fierce. Every moment, every word, every feeling. She stepped closer. Clara, the job was surveillance and information gathering. Falling in love with you was completely unplanned and entirely real. Agent Martinez said you insisted on protecting me. And Richard, I would have burned down the entire operation before I let anything happen to you. Daphne's voice was soft but steady. The case against Anna Cross was important, but you're everything. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be in love with someone whose life is so different from anything I've ever known. We figure it out together. Daphne held up the champagne. Starting with celebrating the fact that your great-aunt's collection is being returned to 17 families across Europe. Anna Cross is going to prison for a very long time, and we're both alive. And free to see what happens next. Clara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. What does happen next? Well, Agent Martinez offered me a permanent position with the Art Recovery Unit, based here in the city. Daphne's smile was hopeful and uncertain, and I was thinking that a woman with a large brownstone and a newly adventurous outlook on life might need a roommate who understands the complexities of recovering stolen beauty. Just a roommate? That depends. Daphne stepped close enough that Clara could smell her perfume again. That light floral scent that had become associated with possibility and transformation. How do you feel about falling in love with former art? Thieves who work for the government and have a complicated pasts? I think, Clara said, reaching for Daphne's free hand, that I'm discovering I have a preference for complicated women who show me parts of myself I never knew existed. This kiss was different from their first desperate connection in the gallery bathroom, different from the hungry exploration in the storage unit. This was the kiss of two people who had found each other against all odds and were choosing to build something new together. When they finally broke apart, both women were smiling. So, Daphne said, want to help me turn this brownstone into a place where recovered beauty comes to rest before going home? Clara looked up at the building that had been in her family for decades, thinking about all the secrets it had held, all the new memories it could house. Yes, she said, let's make it home. Asterisk, 1 year later, dear ones, the brownstone had indeed become a home, not just for Clara and Daphne, but for dozens of pieces of art that passed through their doors on their journey back to families who had never stopped hoping to see them again. The third floor had been converted into a secure viewing room where survivors and descendants could see their recovered heritage before the official repatriation ceremonies. Clara had left her old life completely behind, using her settlement money to fund the recovery program and her newfound investigative skills to research the provenance of disputed pieces. Daphne's work with the FBI had expanded beyond art recovery. She now trained other agents in psychological and cultural complexities of returning stolen cultural artifacts. But more importantly, she had found in Clara a partner who understood that love, like art, is most beautiful when it's shared freely rather than hoarded possessively. On the anniversary of their meeting at the Morrison Gallery, they returned to that same exhibition space, but this time for the opening of Recovered Stories of Art and Redemption, a show that featured pieces from Clara's great aunt's collection alongside the stories of the families who had been reunited with their heritage. Standing in front of the Goldstein family landscape that had started it all, Clara marveled at how much had changed since that first night, when she'd followed a beautiful stranger down a hallway and into a bathroom that had become the unlikely birthplace of the most transformative of her life. No regrets? Daphne asked softly, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. Only one, Clara replied, accepting the glass. What's that? That it took me 43 years to discover I was brave enough to kiss a beautiful art thief. An Aguilera bathroom? Daphne's laughter drew smiles from other gallery goers, but Clara only had eyes for the woman beside her, the woman who had shown her that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the simplest acts of courage. Well, Daphne said, raising her glass in a toast, here's to gallery bathrooms, impossible love stories, and the recovery of beautiful things that were never really lost, just waiting to be found. As they touched glasses, Clara reflected on the truth she had learned over the past year, that love, like art, has the power to transform not just individuals, but entire communities. That sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that can't be possessed. On my experienced and shared dot, and that occasionally, if you're very lucky and very brave, a single kiss in the most unlikely of places can change absolutely everything. Old man's voice fades to a gentle whisper, and so, dear souls, ends this tale of love found in the margins, of beauty recovered from the shadows, and of 2 women who discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures are theons we stumble upon when we're looking for something else entirely. For in the end, are we not all thieves and hunters of a sort? Stealing moments of joy from flourishing current of time, hunting for connections that make us feel less alone in this vast and mysterious world. The gallery bathroom where it all began has been renovated since then, but if you know where to look, you can still find the